Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose, and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life.
There's an interesting thing that happens to us as we start to live our lives in this world. We develop a personality, and we get from our personality really an operating system for our lives. But we also then start taking on identities that are assigned to us by society, given to us by our parents, identities that we take on as we start doing jobs or moving into a new aspect of our lives. We take on identities like father and brother and son. We take on identities like football player or dentist or airline pilot. And these identities really have actions, if you will, that end up being wired into our brains in our neural network systems. And if we're not careful, we end up living life from that space. We end up living life from an automatic reaction to circumstances or stimuli that happen in our lives. And then life becomes automatic. But once you understand that you can rewire these neural networks, once you understand that the identity is not the real you, it's just a way that you're showing up in the world right now, and you can choose to, and then rewire those networks to live a different way, life can be so much different. I'm with Anthony Trucks today, and Anthony is a foster kid turned NFL athlete and serial entrepreneur who teaches people how to access and upgrade their identity to make shift happen in their lives and businesses. With his unique coaching system called the Shift Method, that can also be found in his new book, Identity Shift, Anthony weaves together neuroscience, psychology, technology, and hard fought life lessons to help anyone with a desire for more in their life achieve any goal they want. Anthony Trucks, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
That I am, my man. Whenever you rock and roll, I'm ready to roll with
Well,
you.
I'm ready. I'm so excited to have you here today. I really love the work that you do in my research coming up to our podcast. There's so much that you do and so much that you bring to the world that I believe in. And we also bring in Imagine Miracles. So it's going to be an exciting conversation.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to it.
Anthony, can you share a little bit more about yourself? The bio was so short, and I know the imagination wants to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, it's awfully short. There's a whole lot. I actually have a whole other book of my autobiography, just of up to 30. It was a long book too. No, I am a former foster kid, like you said. I grew up in an interesting dynamic, very poor. Grew up in an all-white family, so a lot of weird, like we'll call it diversity, and kind of we'll call it stability issues, not knowing where I was gonna, be the very next day. And so I wasn't adopted till I was 14, but I was. Tried this thing called football. I was really bad at it because that's just how it starts, right? You try something that you want to do, and then you find out you're not that great. And I had to have that choice that a lot of people do, which is, do I lean back in and try this thing that I want to be able to do, but I'm not that good at, or do I make an excuse and walk away? At the time, I chose option two. I made an excuse and I walked away. And thankfully, there was a moment in time that kind of unsettled me in a positive way, and I leaned back into it, found a way to get great at that, and progressed through to do a whole bunch of ups and downs in life. Man, I got a college scholarship, played football at the University of Oregon, had a son my sophomore year, met my real dad my sophomore year, played in the NFL, tore my shoulder in my third year, came home, was married, had two more kids with my high school sweetheart. Life fell apart bad. I wasn't a present father, good husband, business wasn't going so well. And man, I was in a fog. I call it a fog for like good 5, 6 years. And then unfortunately, I lost my adoptive mom to MS. It was a wake up call. It's one of those moments you're like, something just gotta give. And I started down a trajectory to do better. Didn't happen immediately because that's life. So another 2 years went by before I finally really just like decided it was time. And then I went down a path towards me. Well, I guess I am now, I could call it. And so I've created a really cool life and done some really cool things. And a lot of it comes from the back end of me realizing like it's time for me to do something different and special, which most people they hear, but then actually doing that.
Anthony, you've shared so much in different opportunities for you to quit, but you took the high road. You took the road of finding yourself in many different ways. Can we talk back about the shoulder surgery and how that upset your life and where your head was in that? I'm very interested in this because my football career was ended also with a shoulder surgery. So I'm right in the ballpark with you there.
That you are, man. You were right in the thick of it. No, so I was playing with the Buccaneers. I'm sorry, Buccaneers, Pittsburgh Steelers. It was my third year, would end up being my final year, and we're playing against the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's one of those things. If you've been around the NFL, you realize that like it's hard to get on a team. Like you can get there in camp. It's hard to get to training camp. It's harder to make the 53. It is, man. There's so few spots. But when you're a guy, you know you're a guy. And I finally, after 3 different teams, my third year, I felt like I was a guy. I had my spot. I was doing well. And then we're playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, the first preseason game of the 2008 season. And a guy jumps on my back and tears my shoulder. And so I didn't know at the time, but that ended the season, but it also ended my career. And the last time I wore a football helmet and played in any kind of practice or game was August 8th, 2008. And that was one of those moments where like the world, it didn't come crashing down, but that was like the spark of the fuse, like it was just all running till like boom. And man, it's tough because whenever you lose something for whatever reason, whether by choice or by chance, it's like if you are doing something you've given your all to for a decade plus, or even up to 5 years, 6, whatever it is, you've given your heart to it, and then for whatever reason you wake up one day and you're not doing it anymore, it leaves you with a big hole. Like whether, and this thing, people, this is sports for me, but it's for someone who left their job to get a new job and they don't like the new job, or it feels different, or I sent a kid off to college, or I left the military, or I had a bad breakup, and I'm then out of the relation. No matter what it is, choice or chance, we end up having this area. And so for me at that time, that was a really big like chance situation, and I lost all of what made me feel like I was worthwhile and worthy. And it's a hard place to be when you feel like, okay, well, I've done all this energy work over the years and I got nothing to show for it. Like it's a really dark, unsettling place. So that shoulder injury, it was the worst and best thing to ever happen to me.
When you say the worst and the best, it sounds like, as you shared your story, and maybe I misunderstood it a little bit, but it sounds like there was kind of quite a few ups and downs along the way until the MS diagnosis and that experience. Could you share
Yeah.
how it felt for you to go through those ups and downs?
Horrible. That's how it is, right? It's all my life's been ups and downs, all of us. And for me in those moments, I don't like them. No one likes them. I mean, they're not enjoyable, they're not fun. It's kind of like lifting weights. Like you don't like how bad it burns. You'll like, I love the burn. No, you don't. You love what the burn gives you, like, but there's a thing where like in the moments of it, you're like a leaf in the wind. You're just kind of floating. It's like no matter what I do, nothing wants to go my way. Why do I keep giving energy? And here's the thing, it's even worse, is when things go right, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. So you don't fully enjoy and experience it. So it's like things are going great. It's like, oh, this is great. And you're like, wait, what's going to go wrong? And that's the place that we live. I've lived in that space for, years. Where it's just like, man, I know it's going good and I don't want it to go bad, but I don't want to really lean in and embrace the good because I don't want it to go. So it's like you live in this in between and never fully experience the awesome. So the ups and downs, man, they are difficult. They are mind twist. They can really mess you up inside trying to navigate the ups and downs and lefts and right. But for me at those times, they were not fun. However, in hindsight, I appreciate them.
Always a gift in something, right?
Somehow, man, if you look for it, you got to go looking for it most days. But yeah, it was tough, man.
That's true. And when we do go out and look for it, sometimes it's even tough to believe it's a gift in that moment. But as you said, as you look back, now we can see them a little bit clearer and at least understand how we've grown or where we've become better or more ready to share who we are in the world. So you get to that place then that the MS diagnosis, why was that the thing that really pushed you and triggered you into stepping now into what you're doing?
Well, the thing was, when my mom had been diagnosed with MS in 2014, around the same time that I was actually pretty much put in a foster, like actually, I'm sorry, adopted. So I was adopted at this time, I was out of foster care now. And it was interesting because like she had put all her time and energy into being a nurse. She was, doing her whole nursing thing. And then whenever you get MS, it's autoimmune disease. You can't control your body, a thing goes off. So now she couldn't do like her phlebotomy. She couldn't, do a lot of the just stuff she could do as a nurse. And so all the energy she put in was all for nothing. And it sucked. And I was like at 30 years old, she was diagnosed. And so for a lot of years, just my life, majority, she was doing her thing. And then 2017 came and I'd been going through my ups and downs because, that's just how life happened to pan out. And so by this time, I'd gone through the NFL, divorce, business not going all great, like things just kind of, ups and downs, just never being really where I wanted to be. And what ended up happening was yeah, I was sitting there, and when she passed away, like I was in the room and I watched her take her final breaths. Like I remember my dad, my grandma, and me were watching the heart rate monitor as the beeps decreased to like flatline. It's just a sad, scary. It's real. It's a really like you see it in movies. It's real, and it's just as heavy, if not heavier. And I remember in those moments, it was kind of like this thought of, wow, like that was life, that final. And I think the big thing for me was this realization of my mom was 47 when she passed. At the time, I was 30. And so 17 years, she was 17 years older than me at that time. And the crazy odd thing was life had seemed super fast to 30. Like it just seemed like it was so fast. And so in my head, I'm like, man, I may be here. There's a possibility I'm here for less years than I've already been here. And that seemed fast. Like I do not have time to sit around and do nothing. I do not have time to sit around and wait and to hang out and to think, oh, it'll happen someday. Like I got to go now. And so it started me down a path of trying to figure out what it looked like to live a life. And that was a big, big like push in the right direction.
So you said you started to look at and obviously you looked at and found your path. How did that go? Could you kind of give the audience an idea of, okay, I've got to live life different because who know how long I'm going to be here, and now I'm going to make some changes. How did that go for you, and what was the motivations? Where did you step in? Where did you take some chances that you might not have?
Yeah, everywhere, man. That's the thing is usually in those places we have a lot of problems, and it's like, well, which problem do I focus on? Which one's my fault? And all the questions that roll in. But I had this good realization, which was I am the common denominator in all of my problems. So that was the thing. Like, all right, so if I'm in all of them, I got something to do with all of them. I don't know where. I don't know exactly which piece. Right there, a lot of different things. But what I did know was if I was going to figure this out, then like I got to look at me. It's the best place I can start. And so it started with me looking at the things I was struggling with that weren't fun and trying to actively find the places where I had a hand in it, right? So where my marriage fell apart, where I wasn't a good father, the business wasn't going well, my health not being at peak. I had to find out where exactly is Anthony doing the dirt. Where's his problem, man? Like we got to figure that out. Because if I can't figure that out, then I can't fix it. I can just blame everybody else, but then I'm going to be in having to endure this because it'll never change. And that was the first piece. And so every different situation needed me to be aware of a different problem to solve. And the first part, which sucked, like that I would have never typically done, was own up to things. In situations where we have been hurt the most, the last thing we want to do is own up. I think it's almost easier to think that somebody else caused all my pain. It's harder to look at yourself and go, I caused some of that. And then who do you punish? You got to punish yourself. And people do, and it's difficult and it's sad to see, but it happens sometimes. So I think it's almost easier for us to blame other people than for any reason have to look inside. And so I started doing that. And you asked, how did I do things that I typically wouldn't have done? Like that was it. I apologized to people that were in situations that I was part of where I'd spent years blaming them. Like that's one of the big things. I spent years blaming them. And eventually I was like, no, I have a role in this. They had their role, right? They had their position. They did their things. They took their actions. But it's every interaction with other human beings typically has two people involved. And if I don't look at myself, I'm missing half the problem. And so that was where I started. And I started looking at things that pulled the ego back. So I typically wouldn't do that. I pulled the ego back, said, where can I be better? What did I do wrong? What must I adjust? And that was the big piece of it to begin with. And the more I did that, the better things became.
As soon as we stop becoming a victim and take responsibility for our lives, things can change rather quickly. But it's hard to do sometimes to say, hey, I'm the one responsible here, at least for half of it. And it's time for me to stand up, as you said, and really step out. So it's very interesting. What's your college degree in?
My degree is in kinesiology.
Okay, excellent. So tell us about how neuroscience and psychology and technology comes into your work now.
Yeah, well, the whole thing I look at is identity. And that's a thing that most people they think is this esoteric, spiritual, out of body, separate thing. And really it's not. In fact, our identity is what makes up the life we live now. Because if you think about it, like your identity is who you are when you weren't thinking about who you are. It's just it fills the nooks and crannies, and there are conscious choices that we make, yes, but even those rooted from some form of belief system we had that this is who I am. And even if it's like a saving face or an ego part, a lot of it ties to who you are. And so like the ego shows up in a lot of ways that feed and protect the identity, and no one's aware of it. So essentially the identity is this piece that we have that runs us, that nobody's running. Nobody. It's just there. And we just think we know it exists, but no one thinks like, well, who am I? Oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Well, that to say that you're this and this and this makes you live in a way to make that right. So if you identify as that, you'll do things that persona or whatever does. So if I'm like the person, that's why people talk about, well, it's easier to be able to say, I'm trying to quit smoking than I'm not a smoker, because the statement that I say will force me to live in a way to make that statement right, what I identify as, right? So we are doing this in all areas of our life without understanding it. We have multiple identities. Who I am as a husband is different than who I am as a father or a coach or even on this podcast, right? It's just different personalities. Not that I'm a different guy, I'm the same guy, same beliefs and values and everything, but I show up differently. If I came and said, hey, Vince, how you doing, baby? I love you, man. Like that'd be weird because that's what I do to my wife. Like it's a different identity. So we grasp that. So here's where psychology and neuroscience come in the way that we operate as humans. There are certain like ways that we have patterns and we have habits that are they're psychology based, or there's psychological aspects to how I view myself, how I operate, but the brain is always controlling this. And most people don't see, but there's certain things like, for example, when we look at individuals and say like we have this emotional connection to them, it actually in the brain is something called a mirror neuron system. So like if I look at somebody, they burn their hand, I can go like this with my fingers and kind of like, oof, I can sense how it might feel, and I have this mirroring system. I can also see somebody in the stars and lights on the stage and be like, I want to be a singer like that. And I can feel what it might feel like emotionally, right? That's our brain literally triggering something that makes us have a palpable desire to then manifest this thing we see. So at a neuroscience level, there's like because of neuroplasticity, I have an identity already in place who I am. I was, without even planning, most people had this identity that was wired and structured from a young age, psychologically, for my beliefs and what I feel, and then wired wise for, appreciation, wired for pleasure centers, whatever it might be. And then we get to a life where we're feeling pain and go, how do I adjust this? Well, the fastest thing you can do is if you go into the psychology of yourself and the neuroscience and say, how am I operating? And what am I doing that gives my brain pleasure, right? Maybe I get pleasure from breaking into cars and doing criminal activities, right? But then what if I can rewire that to enjoy going to church or serving the homeless, right? Then I can wire my pleasure center to something else. That's literally a different like neural pathway. And so when I look in the aspect of what I'm doing work wise, my whole thing is how do I get someone to notice who they are currently as an identity? How do I get someone to understand the psychology of how they're thinking, how they're processing, how they're showing up, why they feel unloved, why they feel unworthy? Think through the process, then go, okay, how can I wire the brain to where this is usually built through actions that I can rewire stuff to where they're not actively having to think about how do I not act like that? How do I become somebody new? To to where they just naturally pattern in this new way, to where essentially it feels just as normal effort wise as it did before, but I'm doing something different, hopefully something better, right? So my work is tied around what is that process? What are the actions? How do I treat everybody the same by treating everybody different and all that fun stuff? And so there's a lot of words I just threw at you, but essentially my whole work I do now is I step in, have a lot of deep conversations. I give people a lot of unique actions that are taken off the thought process. So we actually go in and say, let's see who you are. We have a process called the shift method. Let me see who you are and show you. And it's not always fun to see, by the way. Like usually it's like, oof, I don't know if I like that, right? But then I go, okay, great. Well, let's think through how this came to be. Let's look at the psychology of how you're approaching these things. Are you giving blame? Are you taking ownership? What are your personal beliefs? What are your thought processes, right? What's all that? And then from there, we can lean in and go, okay, great. Well, how, if we look at the brain way, like how your brain's working, how do we look at what you're naturally triggered to do? And do you fatigue fast? Do you get frustrated? Like, when do you get, when are you able to focus? Little things that matter. And we start finding out that there's some areas that people can work on and we go, okay, great. Let's start repatterning how you do this, because the action will repattern that brain. And so we can wire the pathways a little bit differently. I mean, you can't draw it on paper, but we'll see the outcome based on like the moment you wake up one day and go, man, I don't know when it happened, but I feel like just something changed. Like most of the time I talk to successful people, I'll ask them, hey, take me back to a moment when you were unsuccessful, didn't have whatever. What were you like back then? And they always like, they'll put their eyes up in the air and kind of roll it around and go, you know what? I was somebody else, because it seriously feels like a different person because the processing, the thoughts, and the way the brain was wired. I can't even think the same way I used to think back then.
Exactly. Some of there are scientists out there that believe that we bring 50% of our neural networks in at birth from the two generations in front of us there. So if that's true, we bring a lot of habits and a lot of patterns into it. And then, of course, we learn from all these wonderful people around us who want to help us as much as they can, even though they might not be helping us, but at least it's their way. And so many of us don't know about neuroplasticity. They don't know that we can actually change our neural networks. So could you explain a little bit how we rewire and how the old networks kind of disintegrate after a while?
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? That's just kind of the that's the good part about it, I guess, to that extent. Not for muscle growth and everything else, but I mean, because we are consistently, the brain's always, it's always building new synapses and connections. There's a cool proteins in the brain, like one's called BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. Like there's these cool little things that when we do certain actions, that actually physically wires the brain differently. So, for example, exercise with BDNF. It's one that a book called Spark by Dr. John Rady. It's over here, my bookshelf. But it's a great book, and what it does, it looks through like people who have like ADHD, who have depression, who whatever it may be, things that where the brain just most people don't even think like I could work on something besides taking a bunch of pills. So what you do is post workout, your brain releases this protein that's responsible for, in fact, creating some of the highways and neural highways, but also managing them, like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, like these chemicals that if they weren't balanced properly, we'd be eating people in public. Like that's that's kind of thing. Like if I wasn't controlled, I couldn't sit there with you and become. And so what happens is what people are trying to do is, how do I become better and do stuff? And well, great. If I could wire the brain differently, I could take different actions. I could be more calm. I can focus more, so I can get more of an achievement, and then I have more personal pride. And it's just a positive cycle. And so what I look at is, whenever you kind of go back to the same habits, same actions, same flow, you're actually re-ingraining that process over time. And in fact, the more that you use it, the stronger that connection gets. That's why we can ride a bike after a while. We can, do swing a bat after a while without having to think of it. It actually goes in the prefrontal cortex. I'm learning it, learning it, learning it. It drops back to the hippocampus, and now it's a process that's just there. It's long-term memory and it's ingrained. The more I use it, the stronger that gets. And so when I have people, I want to kind of have them do new things. I'm like, let's use the same process. Because if I can get you to stop doing the old one and put a new one in, it may be funky now. It feels awkward now. But over time, it becomes a new neural pathway that you use. And the old one you used to use just kind of, it's not used, it kind of goes away. And the brain wires here. Typically, it's done through action, right? So in exercise, BDNF, like that helps with memory and focus and control. and it comes post exercise. Simple, clean way to think action. Same thing can happen when you say you love somebody. You give them an action of love, right? That action of love over time, even they could be yelling at you, they could be mad at you, but if you keep giving the verb of action, your actions put you in experience of that, which wires a pathway for this action to give you a positive feeling, right? It's just over time you feel good. Like, so when people give gifts or they give hugs, like they feel good, right? There's ways we wire it. And essentially it's like, yeah, if you think through the fact that I'm doing this not just for, I don't know, the fact of doing it, but I'm doing it so that in time it feels like a new normal. It doesn't feel like arbitrary pain of anguish of forcing myself to do something. You do it long enough, it just becomes normalcy, which is the brain being rewired, and the old stuff you used to do, you just don't even do anymore.
Could you give us an example, Anthony, of someone that's been through your coaching system, the shift method, and how they rewired, and maybe one that's pretty out there, or maybe a little spectacular, to just give people an idea of how big a change can happen?
Yeah. So it's like it's cool because it extrapolates and it creates momentum. And that's the thing you can't plan for. You can't plan for momentum. I wish I could, but like things just extrapolate and they turn some cool things. So I got two clients that are actually some of my favorite people I've worked with because of the success they've had at both a monetary and like a personal level. So one of them named Frank, and Frank came in and he had a business that he'd done well with, but the problem was he like the process was him going through depression, through addiction, just being out of shape, unhappy. Like he woke up in a hotel room, like broke up from his wife, drugged out, like a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and then just listened to a video or something, like all of a sudden made a choice to do something different. And what he did is he went from feeling like a worthless waste of life human, and he built something and then he sold it. But here's the interesting thing: in selling it, he thought it was an accident. He had success but hadn't focused on rewiring the patterning of who he saw himself to be. So what's funny is after he'd done this successful thing, after this hard bout in life, he was now stuck at a level where he couldn't break through again. He was making like $3,000 a month. He had just sold a business for $1 million, but he thought it was an accident. He thought he shouldn't have had that. So we went in and we worked through a lot of this, like why you think this, how are you doing that? And then we realized, like, okay, you got to believe this and this. And it's hard for a person to believe without faith something that the actions haven't shown to be true, right? So if you have faith, you don't need the visual. You have a knowing, right? But if you don't, and not that you mean it doesn't be spiritual faith, just a faith of self, right? If you don't, you need something to be able to say, okay, I can see it. I got proof, right? So for him, we had to rewire some of these things through actions that he took. And a lot of it was around his business. How do we get this thing structured? How do we get taking these specific actions to get feedback from the world, right? To do some things. And we went through the process. His actions were dialed in towards one direction of building the structure for the family so he could feel like he belonged in a sense of like support and taking care of a wife and kids, all that fun stuff. His manly needs, we'll call it. And fast forward, I want to say about a year and a half after working with him, he went from making like 3,000 a month to 200 plus $1,000 a month. Right. And the thing is the same information was in his head, Vince. There wasn't much new information. What he knew, he already knew, like it wasn't like we went in like, here's some new strategies and techniques. And people assume like, I need more books. I need more coaching programs. Like, yeah, you don't. You need to be the person who can utilize what you already have in your head. Because if you're that person, you'll figure it out. You'll fill in the gaps. You'll be the person that comes back and is selling those programs and structures of people, right? Another person was Natasha, who she'd already been in Canada, like doing some great things with her business. She'd already been like, entrepreneur of the year for a couple of things. I want to say like amazing. Right. And she wanted to venture into more of the online world of the coaching. And there was a moment in time when she had opportunity to do some things, but what she did is she did a safety thing of, I'm going to reach out to them next month. It was December. I'm going to reach out to them next month or the month after. I'm like, why would you do that? Well, I got this going on and this going on. I'm like, well, at the end of the day, you can make great excuses, but I got a feeling you could probably find an hour somewhere in your entire month to give this person a call. And even if they did come on as a client, you could probably find an hour somewhere to hop on a call with them before next month. Yeah, but let's just try that. So we did that. And the funny thing is she in her head, with all the success, still had this conversation and wiring of and patterning of, I don't know if I can, it may not work out. Long story short, it fast forward, it turned into her having the best financial month of her, I think, the year in December. And 3 months later, she ran into the same kind of wall again. And I was like, because the COVID went crazy. And then she's like, I don't have any, I got to find a way to get this online. I'm like, you could do this. You've already done it. I don't know. I'm like, not only are you going to solve it, but I'm going to have you create something for other people to help them. Oh, I can't do that. That's not me to do it. So what do we have to do? Had to do some things to rewire it, right? So we went in and had her. I said, what would you do if someone asked you how to do this in a weekend? And she wrote it all down. Okay, great. Now, what would you have to do to get someone to believe that this would work? And we wrote it all down. Okay, now what do I have to do to get someone to actually see this thing you talked about? Okay, so within a week's time, we got it dialed in. I was on a coaching call with her when the first sale came through in the email. Bing, email comes through. Someone bought your program. Fast forward, I think it was 4 weeks, she brought in $95,000 in coaching program, like people selling or sales. And she worked with like 417 businesses in an area that she didn't at first believe she was supposed to be doing anything special for. So these are financial outcomes. But the cool thing is, though, Frank has an amazing marriage. He has a couple kids. He's a present father. He lives his life with family first. You can see it. Natasha, she is so driven in the way of how she serves her clients, all the things she's created. She serves people beyond, like even the program she sold, she was selling it for probably a third of what it should have been put at. Like humongous hearts that allow them to have freedom to be in an extra open space of their heart to serve at a higher level. And again, there was no new information. They didn't go, and they just took what they already knew and they became the person through a little bit of actions that they needed to be to have that kind of success.
It's more of really just understanding how to rewire and how to then use what you already know, that vast amount of knowledge, that everything that we can tap into and make things happen. So spectacular examples of how we really truly can step into it just by understanding how our actions and our beliefs and how everything together in the past has put us on a path that's just automatic. And once we break that automatic path and create a new one, life can be so much different. So thank you so much for what you do. You shared so much great information, and we're actually right at the end of our time, believe it or not. So I want you to share a little bit about the book that's coming out. And please, Anthony, share how people can get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah. So best place to go find me is Instagram. You go to @AnthonyTrucks on Instagram. I do a whole bunch of cool stories. I don't actually talk as much about this. I really had a blast just sharing kind of the science behind it, because that's not what people like to watch on Instagram. They want to know, like, how do I deal with my mom acting crazy? Like little stuff, right? But that's the best place. If you'd like to understand how all the stuff I talked about at a high level could be brought down to earth and be actionable in the shift method, I wrote a book called Identity Shift, Upgrade How You Operate to Elevate Your Life. You go to identityshiftbook.com. If they use code MUP, they get a free audio book along with it. They also get a workbook, and they'll also get like a digital version of the book. So that's just a gift to your listeners. And the first 10 people to go there, I'll actually sign a book and send them out a second copy of it from my home. But the book, I'm excited because it's a way for me to take all this information and make it very simple. I wrote it in a way that my 16-year-old son would get it. So all the gold is there, but it's not like it's written from a scientist.
Awesome. The things that you're doing and what you're bringing into the world is definitely living your divine intent. It's obvious by listening to you. It's obvious by how you're willing to share what you know with the world in the way that you are. So, Anthony Trucks, thank you for being who you are.
Thank you, and I appreciate it.
We appreciate you showing up here. All that information that Anthony shared with us is going to be on the show page. So just go to the miracleu.com, look for Anthony Truck's show page. That information will be available for you. He's given some amazing gifts and some opportunities here for you to reach out and learn more about the identity shift, the shift method, and Anthony Trucks and what he brings to the world. Anthony, thank you for being with us today. We truly appreciate you. And I got a feeling that we'll probably be talking again soon.
I hope so, man.
On behalf of Mary, my wife and business partner, and the entire Imagine Miracles team, we want to wish you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 mind-awakening steps toward your unique purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.